Okay, so tonight we are doing Riverine
Okay.
Riparian Ecology. The ambassador for this one is going to be Bill Burge, as well as Liz Smith has been working with him. You've seen Bill at least already. Bill, if you want to go ahead, take it away.
Yeah, uh, I'm going to be real quick because we got all the key players here, and I mostly just do their introductions and then step the hell out of the way. But when I started looking at the Master Naturalist classes back in, and I was in the class of 2017, one of the things that really attracted me was I was going to get to go to places that other people don't get to go and see things that they're not going to be able to see. And one of the best of those things is Fantasy Ranch, which is where we're going to be on Saturday. And it's just a really, really special spot. And Katie is the manager for that ranch and darn near everything else on the UT campus. And so I'm going to turn it over to her real quick for intros, and then Liz Smith is I guess, our lead educator, and Greg Simmons is our lead geologist, and they're going to be very key to the educational work that we're going to do on Saturday. So we look forward to seeing you out there, and I'll hand it off to Katie, and away we'll go.
Perfect. Thank you, Bill. I'm gonna share my screen. Let's see how this works. I'm gonna. What are y'all seeing? Is it the presentation?
Yeah.
Yep,
Okay,
presentation.
perfect. Um, well, thank you, Bill. My name is Katie Swanson. I am the reserve and ranch manager. I'll kind of talk about what the reserve is here in a second and give a few background slides on the Mission Aransas National Estuarine Research Reserve and how we are connected and related to Fantasy Ranch. So the National Estuarine Research Reserve or system, or the reserve, I may call the Mission Aransas the reserve, is part of a national system, a national network. We are funded and mandated through NOAA. So NOAA kind of gives us direction and guidance on what we should be doing in our priorities and mission. And then every reserve has a state partner. So our state partner is the University of Texas at Austin, and we are headquartered at the UT Marine Science Institute in Port Aransas. The mission of the national system is to practice and promote stewardship of coasts and estuaries through innovative research, education, and training using a place-based system of protected areas. And I'll kind of go a little more deeper into what that means. But there are 30 reserves around the country. We are the only one in Texas, and we are the only one west of the Mississippi. Here is kind of an outline of our boundaries. So we, like I mentioned earlier, we're headquartered in Port Aransas, so the very southern tip of our boundary. And then we go through Copano and Aransas and Mesquite Bay system. The Aransas Wildlife Refuge is within our boundary, as well as Goose Island State Park. And then we also have a conservation easement at and on Fantasy Ranch, which is that little blurb up the Mission River. We are the third largest reserve in the system at just over 186,000 acres. Our headquarters are in Port Aransas on the UT Marine Science Institute. We are located just along the jetty and the ship channel. We also have a educational facility in Rockport. The Bay Education Center is run by our education team. And then we have some education facilities as well at Fantasy Ranch. We could not do what we do without our partners. So let me go back real fast. So if you're looking at our boundary, you will notice that we are not a major landowner within our reserves. Some of the other reserves around the system own and manage their property. We own and manage our the property that the university owns in Port Aransas. Besides that, a lot of our partners are the land owning entities, such as the General Land Office, the Coastal Bend Bays and Estuaries Program, as well as Texas Parks and Wildlife. We also partner with U.S. Fish and Wildlife on a lot of projects, the City of Rockport, Aransas County NAV District, TNC, and basically a lot of entities, the International Crane Foundation, and TxDOT as well. Within each reserve, we have different sectors. So there are 4 core sectors or programs within a reserve. There's research, coastal training program, stewardship, and education. Many of you may have known me with my previous hat. I was the stewardship coordinator for many years before I took over the management of the reserve. And I'm going to kind of go through, I think, what each sector does real fast, give a quick overview. So the research sector is primarily tasked with doing our water quality. So within the reserve, we have 5 water quality stations. They collect water quality, and they have collected water quality continuous for over 20 years now. So we have YSI sondes at these 5 stations, and they collect temperature, salinity, DO, pH, basically around the clock, every 15 minutes. We've had a couple breaks in data. Hurricane Harvey obviously wiped out a number of our stations, and it took some time to rebuild and get some stations back up and running. But for the most part, we try to collect continuous data. And that's one of those system-wide kind of protocols and methodologies. You can also obtain the data if you Google CDMO and the NERR. It brings you up to the NOAA website that allows you to gain real-time access to that water quality as well as weather data as well for 2 of our stations. Oh, here's just an example of some of the data you can get from the CDMO if you're ever interested in grabbing some data. The Coastal Training Program, or we may call it CTP, basically what this program does, it really builds the bridge between the science and the users. So Joan, our CTP coordinator, is out in the communities trying to understand the needs of decision makers, whether it's, mayors and city councils, floodplain managers, or resource managers, grad students here at the university, understanding what they need, and then going out and trying to find the resources to bring that training to the local communities. Our education, we do K through 12. We do a lot of site programming, on-site programming. So at the UT Marine Science Institute and at the Bay Education Center in Fennessy, but then they also do a ton of community outreach events, Earth Day, Bay Day, as well as going into the schools and the classrooms to teach. Education also does TOTES, or Teachers on the Estuaries, where we bring in teachers each summer, teach them specific programs, and as well as give them the resources, the tools, the supplies they need to bring those programs into their classroom. And then we also have a number of field and vessel programs. So we do have some RV, kind of larger vessels that can bring school groups out for day programming as well. And then stewardship was my little baby for a while. It focuses a lot on stewardship of the land and the environment. So we do a lot of habitat monitoring, vegetation, invasive species removal, focus on marine debris monitoring, as well as removal. And then restoration has been a real big part of the stewardship program these last couple of years as well. We do, along with the water quality, we do annual habitat monitoring. So we have specific transects and sites in the bays in the marsh as well as the mangroves that we go out to year after year and monitor. So we have almost 15 years. I guess this year will be 15 years of data at some of these sites, which is awesome. Since we're mandated to do this, we have the data for 15 years. So we had a ton of data before Harvey, after Harvey, so that we could look at impacts of Harvey as well as Winter Storm Uri with the mangroves. We were able to really kind of understand the impacts. And then also we have the infrastructure in place where we can continuously monitor the recovery of these habitats and properties as well. We've done marine debris projects. We're actually just kicking off. We hired a marine debris specialist. So in the past, I did a lot of marine debris research, but now we have a person that is kind of dedicated to marine debris research, monitoring, as well as all the education outreach for that topic. Mentioned, we do a lot of habitat restoration. This is a photo of Beach Street property in Port Aransas. It was heavily impacted by the annoying Brazilian pepper tree. And so we were able to kind of rip that out, treat it, do a number of retreatments, but also come back in and do some reseeding and plugs and plantings and watch that habitat kind of come back to life. The Waterwise is one of my babies. That was the first project I ever took on solo and received funding for. So that took a lawn area on the UT Marine Science Institute MSI campus and turned it into a walking trail. We partnered with the master naturalist, Laura Clark, as well as Ellen Rasinger, were the two rock stars of this project. They helped plan, obtain the plants, do community plantings, weedings, and the garden is still going pretty strong and looks amazing right now. Okay, and then we also have the Amos Rehabilitation Keep that is, or the ARC is under the Mission Aransas Reserve as well. And that, we go out and we rescue sea turtles and shorebirds and seabirds within the Mustang Island, San Jose area. Okay, so Fennessy Ranch is why you guys are here. This is the main gate you will find when you turn off Highway 2678 on Saturday. So look for this metal gate and you will enter. Here is a map. So Fennessy Ranch is just over 3,200 acres. It's a very diverse property. I'll kind of go into that. But as I mentioned, it's up the Mission River, and we have about 7 miles of riparian habitat on that property. We obtained the conservation easement in 2006, and we worked with Sally Crowfoot, who had been managing the ranch for about 30 years, and Brian Dunn, or O'Connor Dunn. And then when Brian passed in 2016, the ranch went into a trust and is now managed by the estate. And then Sally Crowfoot had a strong desire to retire, rightfully so, after many years of doing amazing things at the ranch. And so we took that as an opportunity for us to actually take over the daily management of the ranch. So we are now the primary contact and managers of the entire property. As I mentioned, there are very multiple diverse habitats on the property, from riparian to freshwater wetlands, coastal prairie, scrub shrub. You'll come in a scrub shrub, you'll go down one road, and you'll go straight into riparian habitats. It's pretty cool. But there's about 400 species of birds, 16 plant communities, over 50 kinds of amphibians, reptiles, moths, and we try to do annual annual monitoring, not just vegetation, but also wildlife, bugs. And we work with UT Austin a lot for some of this monitoring. Here's just some photos of the wetlands on the ranch. They might be pretty dry right now, but they are wetlands. Just some photos. And some history of the ranch. So Fennessy is part of a legendary 750,000 acre Texas land empire that remained in the same family. I believe you're going to watch a video. Liz will introduce that video that provides a lot more introduction in history. The ranch is located in the heart of the Central Flyway, and as obviously it's in the Texas coastal bend. But here's just a photo of the Mission River. I think this is one of the sites you guys will be at. Oh, I already kind of went through some of this history. So here's just some photos of Brian and Sally Crowfoot. And Brian was really passionate about making sure the ranch had a conservation focus to it. He really wanted to manage the ranch to have like healthy habitats. So he focused on not just trying to, extract and put oil and gas on the land, but try to figure out how he could make that property sustainable through environmentally sound practices, whether that was ecotourism and photography and birding, or being part of the deer management deer program with Texas Parks and Wildlife. It is a working ranch, and it still is a working ranch. So we do have cattle on the property. We have oil and gas. There is no active extraction currently on the ranch, but there are live pipelines and active pipelines. We do allow hunting on the ranch. So we have 8 hunting leases, as well as offer some public hog hunts as well. And as I just mentioned, we do try to strive to bring as much ecotourism into the ranch as possible through birding tours, photography trips, classrooms, stuff like that. We have not burned lately. We are actively trying to get fire back onto the property. So you may wonder why there's so much shrub and scrub around, but we are actively trying to get the fire back on the landscape. We have a number of invasive species, including cat's claw, Chinese tallow, your grass. There's a number of Angleton, Old World, Blue Stem, King Ranch, Guinea grass, Bermuda. There's a lot of invasive grasses. We've got the hogs that I mentioned earlier. And one thing we also do is this vegetation monitoring. And the master naturalists have helped tremendously in the past with this. So we have a number of established transects at the site, and we do monitor, or we try to monitor twice a year, in the spring and the fall, to make sure that we get a true understanding of the breadth of vegetation, the diversity. There's multiple reasons for this. One, we just want to understand what's on the property. But 2, if I go in, this is a photo of St. John's Prairie. I need to go in. I need to control that brush. That is one of our top priorities. We're probably going to do aerial spray here in the next couple months. I want to know how it changes with our land management practices. So having the data before and after allows us to understand the long-term environmental changes as well as the impacts of our land management decisions. There's Ray. We do a lot of education at the ranch. So this is Monarch Madness. which is an event we've hosted, I think, almost 20 years now. It's about 250 area school kids, fourth through sixth grade. We have a number of different partners come and host tables at the ranch, and then it's over one day. And as long as the conditions allow, we release birds, or not birds, sorry, monarchs and insects that the kiddos collect as well. We've done a number of totes at the ranch as well, which is that teachers on the estuaries, so training the teachers. So now I'm just going to close real fast with some, I kind of explain different volunteer opportunities or ways that the Master Naturalists have historically partnered with us at the Mission Aransas Reserve and Fennessy Ranch. So at Fennessy, the Master Naturalists have helped, as I mentioned, with vegetation monitoring. Some have been kind of plant sources, so they may have grown some plants for us and bring it to the ranch and work with us on where they should be planted or monitored. I am not a birder, so I need all the help I can get monitoring the birds at Fennessy Ranch. So we can host birding days for bird monitoring programs. Invasives, we've done a number of invasive species before. Bill was there for one memorable day with some tallow removal. Education programming, we often ask or need help volunteers for that, as well as some public tours, stuff like that. In Port Aransas at the Marine Science Institute, we're always looking for help to maintain some of our habitats, such as the Waterwise Garden, conduct bee tour guides. We also have the Wetlands Education Center and the Bay Education Center in Rockport. All need help maintaining the habitats, kind of removing the guinea grass, mulching properties as well. I'm not sure if many of you are aware of the Brazilian pepper tree in the Gulf, the Texas Gulf Region Cooperative Weed Management Area, but it's another large partnership that's focused on the removal and the control of Brazilian pepper tree. So we host at least 2 work days a year, as well as monitoring for Brazilian pepper tree and we attend a number of education outreach events as well. And then there's always marine debris cleanups. And actually, I need to reach out to you guys to find out who your contact is, but we're going to try to reestablish the Eggery Flats cleanups. Those were cleanups we historically did with the Master Naturalists twice a year at Eggery Flats. So as you're driving to the ranch, you may drive over Eggery Flats and look at all the disgusting trash. So we try to clean those up. And with the new marine debris specialist, I'm really pushing her to get that cleanup back up and running. And then
Katie, have her reach out to me. I'll figure out who she needs to talk to.
Okay. I mentioned to Katie that she needed to contact you, Bill. And then
I was thinking that was who it was. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. We have Nurdle Patrol as well. You can reach out to us on Nurdle Patrol to learn protocols and how to submit your data with that as well. And then the ARC, we do not really have what you would call on-site volunteers with the ARC at the moment. But we do have a rescue squad. So as long as you have the correct training that we can get you set up with, you can be listed on our permit and then be part of the rescue squad for the ARC. Oh, and that is a really old contact, so I'm gonna skip that page. And you can check us out. Currently, our website is down. I will say that we are revamping our website, so It will just send you to the UTMSI website, but hopefully in the next month or two, our website will be back up and running. But you can also follow us on Instagram or Facebook as well. And then the Fennessy Ranch website is also down, getting revamped. And I think we're trying to combine the two websites, but we'll still have the FennessyRanch.net. It'll just probably direct you to the Mission Aransas website. And any questions, I am happy to answer.
We do have one in the chat from Lauren Martin. Katie, do y'all work in South Texas? Curious in Brooks County. We have a large lake on our property called Salt Lake. I'd like to implement some conservation that dovetail with cattle and nilgai ranching with controlled hunting.
No, did you say, sorry, was that Brooks County?
Yes.
We do not, but I can try to hook you up with some of our partners that may.
Yeah, I thought it might be too far south, but this lake is, we're not along the coast. So it is, actually, I ought to know this. It's been in our family for 3 or 4 generations, but sometimes it's dry and it looks like a desert. It's 900 acres of lake. And sometimes it's completely dry and looks like sand. And then as it is now, it's filled with water, but it's salty water. So I'm not sure where it's coming from, but it's owned by our family, several different groups from the descendants of those that my great grandfather and then went down. So I don't know. I'd like to, start thinking about similar to the Fennessy Ranch, something that is conservation and improves the land, takes care of the land and the wildlife. And I just didn't know if you were the right person to contact.
If you and I also need to put my email. Sorry about that.
Jeremy can give you my phone number if you do have a good referral. I don't want to say it out loud. I mean, even though we all have each other's phone numbers.
No, I mean, if you just want to email me or get in contact with me, I can try to get you in contact with a number of different folks.
Okay, sounds great.
Yeah, specifically right off the bat, I would say USDA or Texas Parks will come and do site visits and give you amazing information on recommendations.
Well, that would probably be an excellent starting place and then go from there. That's a great referral.
Even I still rely heavily on their site visits and recommendations.
Okay.
We also
great. Thank you, Katie. That was a very informative presentation.
Oh, thank you.
We have one from Mark Crowdy. What's the biggest challenge currently at Fennessy?
Lack of water. And habitat-wise, there's a lot of challenges. There's a lot of multi-user challenges at the ranch, trying to balance, your photography tours with your hunters and your cattlemen. And then trying to get fire back on the ground or, trying to tell the cattle guy where he can and cannot graze because I'm trying to build fuel for a fire. So yeah, there's a number of different challenges at the ranch. Habitat-wise, it's going to be tallow. With the recent drought, the last couple of years, the tallow has taken over. I think you guys are going to go to Miguel Lake. That also is a major challenge. Historically, that was an open body of water. We had kayaks that we used to take groups out into this lake. You will see that is not possible anymore. There's there's no water, there's bulrush, and then there is tons of tallow. Along the sides, but also just in the middle of the lake because there's no water anymore. So we're working with U.S. Fish and Wildlife to get a new water well put in, as well as start trying to do some aerial sprays and control vegetation control.
Next question from Tatum. It's a twofer. So y'all do anything with outreach or education for red tide Vibrio? And then also, what is the largest reserve currently, NERC reserve?
We do some outreach with Vibrio. I would probably, so we work with partners a lot. So Vibrio is more, I would say like more of a oyster expert. So I usually tend to go with Jenny Pollock. We partner with them. Actually, one of Jenny Pollock's grad students is our Davidson Fellow. So we do work with other universities as well. Red Tide, we do monitoring, but currently our previous research coordinator was a big plankton expert. So he was more into the red tide. We do still have flow cytobots and are monitoring for the red tide and do some education outreach. It's just not really one of our expertise at the moment. And the largest reserve is Alaska currently. It's Ketchimat Bay. No. And I cannot remember the size, but it is massive. However, there is a reserve that may come online in the next year or two in Louisiana. And that reserve was even going to be larger than Alaska, potentially. They were still working on the boundary, but I think they are definitely going to knock us down to number 4.
All right. Last question, I think, is Smith. What types of research are being conducted on the ranch?
There's a lot of research and it's kind of cool. There's a big push for us here on the coast to kind of build a few more bridges with main campus. And so in the last year or two, we've had a lot of UT Austin researchers get interested at the ranch and set up sites. So we've had some green jay research and monitoring going on at the ranch. I have there are some sentinel sites or long-term cactus monitoring for an invasive moth that is impacting the prickly pear. Fennessy's kind of right on the western edge, so it's kind of coming across Texas. And so they set up a site at Fennessy. I believe the moth is in Rockport, but they had not found it at Fennessy yet. So they come and check those sites regular. And then we also just installed a MODIS station at the ranch. I believe actually it came online 2 days ago. So that's brand new. And then we also do some soundscape ecology as well. And so if you guys you'll be at Miguel Lake, you'll see the MODIS tower as well as the sound recording equipment as well. And that's just a few of the projects.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Katie. I really appreciate it.
Thank you guys. And yeah, and I don't think I'm gonna make it out there Saturday, so have fun at the ranch. I'm sorry I'm gonna miss you guys. But many of y'all have met my son Drew before, and he is demanding an egg hunt on Saturday morning. So I'm gonna go to the egg hunt. But have a good weekend and have a fun trip.
Thank you.
Thanks, Katie.
Bye.
I believe
Yes.
we're going to do the video. Do we have that set up?
Liz, you going to share?
Yeah. Let's see, as soon as Katie gets
I know I'm trying to it's saying that I've stopped. Oh boy.
I have it set so multiple can share. You should be allowed to now. I think you may just override her.
Okay,
Let's see.
all righty.
Oh, now you
Um,
can get rid of it.
well, there she goes. Okay,
Okay.
thanks, Katie. Good to see you.
You too, Les.
Okay, so good evening, everyone. I'm Liz Smith, and I became a master naturalist with the class of 2020 during COVID. So we missed a lot of field trips that year, but we still accomplished our task and got through the course. And so that the one thing that I did have a previous continuing connection with the Mid-Coast Master Naturalist was I started teaching some of the training back in the early 2000s. And we kind of came upon this riparian ecology training while my students were working on it. I had two students at Texas A&M University, Corpus Christi, at the Center for Coastal Studies that actually came to me and said, I really want to be a riparian ecologist, which is pretty darn exciting because we generally think a lot about the estuarine systems when we're along the coast. And also something else that I just wanted to mention too was that during the working on Senate Bill 3, which was to adopt environmental flow standards, I was on the BBEST team, which was Bay and Basin Expert Science Team for the Guadalupe San Antonio Aransas Mission River Basin, but I didn't represent any coastal estuarine habitat, but represented riparian habitat in there. And that was another really great opportunity for us to look at the system at a much bigger level and show how the influence of the riparian system benefits our estuarine bays and estuaries and everything that lives in them. So cool stuff. And so a lot of what I talk about is based on all that information. And I will see about sharing the video. This video was produced when Brian Dunn was going to be honored in one of the wildlife photo contests back in the early times of that program that's still going on. And I was asked to do a video, have myself and my students at the Center for Coastal Studies do that. So let's see how this goes. Sound optimize. We're going to try this. It's not letting me optimize this time, but we'll give it a whirl. No. Yeah. I see. My my internet is unstable.
Would it be possible to get the video sent over to me or something, and I can try and share it?
No, I think it's pretty big. Let's see. Just stop sharing again. And let me go out of the system for a second. Back in. Oh, well, any
Was
suggestions?
there a bit ago.
Yeah.
Can't make sure. If you bring it on a flash drive or something on Saturday, I'll get it uploaded to the YouTube channel and I can send it out to everybody and they can at least watch it that way, just as an option.
Alrighty. It's just not, gosh. We got it to play earlier. Probably just should have let it go. Okay, well, that's too bad. Well, we'll move on. And then maybe we'll take a little break here at 6 at the halftime and see if we can't work on that a little bit and then come back in. So I will now go to my presentation. Right. Everything looking good?
Yes, it is.
I'm gonna go ahead and use I have a dog that barks a lot, so.
All right, Dan. So the main focus of this training session is to talk about a basic introduction to the physical, biological, and ecological characteristics, and to understand how riparian systems are interconnected to their surrounding uplands, river, and estuarine systems in our Gulf coastal bend. And then also, as Katie brought identify some potential projects that we'll talk more about in the field. And I just want to acknowledge the folks that are working on this with me, the primaries, Katie Fernald, who is the wetland rangeland ecologist at the International Crane Foundation's Texas side of the Gulf Coast programs, will be working with this on Saturday. Katie is a very accomplished ecologist that knows everything. She's just amazing in what she knows for plants, animals, relationships, and all that. And then Greg also will be talking tonight about another one of our sites that we'll be visiting in tying in artesian systems into how it fits into our coastal systems. And then Bill Burge everywhere, all at once, out in the field, and gonna help us keep things together on Saturday. So thanks, Bill. Good luck. So the question first off is, what is a riparian? And there are very, very many different definitions of riparian systems. They are transitional between aquatic environments of rivers and streams and the adjacent terrestrial environment of the uplands. It is a difficult place to draw a line because they are in a state of change depending on the local conditions to conditions that maybe established a lot of the vegetation decades, centuries ago that are now being converted to other dominant plants and animals due to changes in climate, rainfall patterns, and land use. So we look at two different ways of looking at managing the system, both at the watershed and land management for the terrestrial and riparian relationships, but also water resource managers focusing on the riparian and the aquatic interrelationships. And something that I mentioned about those state standards for the amount of environmental flows that can come through the system to increase the quality of in-stream habitat, as well as those that are the water that flows into the estuarine system, is that this is all very, very connected, and in the understanding of it is important. So on the left, you see a schematic diagram of the system going from the water body, which in our case is the Mission River, and then moving up towards the uplands on the right-hand side. And you see that there's the vegetation is being, the function that it provides is bank stability. And of course, these are the vegetation that do that work along with the soil that's been deposited there and their root systems, but also a lot of woody debris being able to hold sediment in place. And then as that organic matter decomposes, it provides a very nutrient rich soil in situ right there in the floodplain areas. But also pretty neat is that when we have a flood and the floodplain is covered with water, as it recedes, it carries all those nutrients down and debris down to the estuarine systems. I'll just mention this here that the estuarine systems are in our area are actually detritus driven. So you think about crabs and shrimp, etc. They feed on detritus, and so the whole system then depends on them there being there in abundance. So that's another connection between the riparian system and the estuaries, and then also getting mineralization within that system and that flowing within and through the system. The schematic on the right also shows how we can compartmentalize some different habitat types. The upland on both sides. This time we have the riparian system then on the lower downgrade, and then wetlands on either side, a channel shown in the middle right, and there can actually be more wetlands with these the riparian within the system as well. So we're going to talk as simply as we can about the downgrade of the riparian system, but in fact, because of the way it meanders and what Greg will be talking about a lot, you get a lot of diversity from these topographic features.
Hey, Liz, real quick, do you have some kind of text box or pop-up open on the bottom of the screen? And now another one at the top?
No.
Black.
We're seeing gray squares.
Yeah. Top one just disappeared again.
Okay. The bottom one is my the box that we get that says audio, video participants? Is there a way for me to get rid of that?
I believe you can have it minimized. I'm trying to find the spot for it myself.
Maybe right click on it.
I could hide floating meeting controls.
Yeah.
Yeah, try
Give that a
that.
shot.
That'd be good.
Okay. I'm really out of control now. Okay, how's that?
Well, that one went away, and now we have a strip in the center. Okay, fine.
No, we're good now.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
Liz, you also got a question. Basic definition: does riparian include adjacent areas to dry creek beds, seasonal creek systems, or just constantly flowing creek adjacent areas?
Okay. So, so actually, one of the diagrams in your notes is a stream order diagram. And so there's been some really great studies done along the Texas coast and in our coastal river systems that talks about how vegetation communities are the dominant plants in them change as you move upstream. But anything that is influenced by the presence of water either above ground or even below ground running through the stream bed gravel can be riparian. Does that work for that? So this definition is really something that tries to capture all of it, and I like the diagram on the right that shows that it's that it actually is this basket of productivity and these root masses that maintain the bank stability, the channel stability, and also it actually is very helpful in holding in the vegetation that that cradle holding the stream bed above the bedrock and protecting the banks. So vegetation is super important in riparian systems. Well, now I can't. So I'm not able to advance. I think what might be a good idea is for us to take a short break and for me to reboot my computer.
Okay. I think that's probably a good idea. It's around the middle anyway. So why don't we do that? What would you like? 10 minutes, you think?
Well, just as brief as we can be, because I'm not sure how. Yeah, how long do you normally take? Do you take 10? Because we can do that.
10, depending. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Let's aim for 10 then.
Okay. I'll be back. Sense of wood. And also loss of fish and wildlife habitat. So the value of that is for us. What do we value? And why is this important when we're talking about managing systems? Because if it doesn't matter to us, we don't necessarily take care of it. So understanding how it functions and then what that provides for us improves the capability of us being able to convey that to others and to protect these systems and their functions. So with that, we get improved water quality and fish and aquatic habitat, terrestrial. Really important one, aesthetic values. That's become a very important value because we if we love the look of a landscape, we'll want to continue to have that landscape. So this is something we'll be talking about out in the field. There is a wetland indicator system, and there's lists of these on the internet. We have a source for that for you in your notes. And basically, anything that's in that database has a wetland indicator. If it's not, then it's an upland plant. So we go from the permanently flooded areas of wetlands, not not a lake, but of the permanently flooded areas that are shallow. And those are wetland obligate plants. They'll always be found there. They will very rarely be found anywhere else. Then the facultative conditions would be those that are usually found in wet locations and in non-wet locations. And then the uplands, of course, are the obligate upland plants that would be almost always found not in a wetland condition. There's some nuances to the facultative condition, and that would be that some are actually usually found in wet locations, fac wet, and then those fac up, usually found in non-wet locations. So what we want to get from this is that if we go out and we do some vegetation surveys, we can actually find out a lot about what the conditions are and even what the conditions have been in the past by the species wetland indicator. And so we'll be using this quite a bit. And something else that is also in your notes and that we're just going to go over briefly here, but there's a whole document that's been published on this, and that is, how do we determine wetland function? And so the first question is there a clearly defined active floodplain? And so the wider the floodplain that is active, the wider the riparian zone. And so generally that flooding basis should be about once every 1 to 3 years. We're in a semi-arid location, and so a lot of our systems don't get that 1 every 3 years on a regular basis. We have more of a drought cycle and then very wet, shorter cycle in a given 10-year period. So that one is a little bit harder for us. And then also whether there's a storage of water, and that's determined by the presence of those obligate plants, because they wouldn't be able to survive there if they didn't at least have their roots saturated most of the time. The interesting thing we'll do on our plant transect on Saturday is, are there young and middle-aged plants? You know, a lot of times you'll go to a system in the west, the southwest, and looking at a system that has cottonwoods, and we do have cottonwoods along our riparian systems in South Texas. But are there any new cottonwoods? Are there any young ones, middle-aged ones? Or do we only have the old ones that actually established when conditions were different and appropriate for them? So each one of these then give you an indication of the health of the system. So as these, there's also the importance of grasses and sedges. So we don't just look at the trees, but also the whole vertical stratification of the system. And we'll talk more about that in the field. And we want to have a lot of plant diversity. That's very important because if you have plants that can tolerate drier conditions, they can become more dominant during those times and then be replaced in dominance by species that can tolerate more wet conditions. Looking at the health of the plant is very important. Of course, when something is heavily grazed, it is impacted in its productivity, in renourishing its roots that hold it fast in the system when it's flooding. So healthy and vigorous is important. And for some areas, there's been some designations of at least how much coverage should be these stabilizing plants and along the length of each bank. as I mentioned about the cottonwood, that you should have some young recruitment, but also do we have adequate numbers of the medium-sized and large-sized trees? Because that actually provides that wood source um, for increased habitat within the riparian floodplain, but also in the channel. Not that we have this much of a situation here, but boulders or the large anchored logs, which we would have, provide additional in-stream habitats. And then as you look at it from above, the way that the river meanders, are there additional overflow channels, secondary channels, and backwater sloughs or oxbows? We'll be visiting one of those on the Tennessee, the McGill Lake. And this indicates that the river has been moving within its channel between the two uplands, and it continually is building and receding. And Greg will talk more about that. Cut banks and channel erosion, are they being compensated by the enlargement of stabilized point bars? Greg will cover that. And then are they vertically stable? That's very important so that sloughing doesn't occur, and the bank fall, and then also creating more sediment than normal in the stream bed. So is the water and sediment in proper balance? So this is from a riparian, Texas Riparian Areas book that was published in the early teens. And these are actually images from Mission River. And we'll be going to some of those places, and I think you'll recognize them. But it obviously shows that there's a very extensive diversity of bank formation, vegetation, and an active system. So we want to get into some of the different species that we'll be seeing. And this comes from that Riparian Areas handout that you can download. And I'm just going to go through this fairly quickly. But what I wanted to show is that, how much information there is for not only identifying the plant, but also whether it's an annual or perennial. That's very important. If it's an annual, is it reestablishing? If it's a perennial, that actually helps in stabilization and productivity. And then also that wetland indicator status there is a facultative for this, what they call broadleaf uniola. I call inland sea oats, and very, very key grass in the riparian system, as it can tolerate a lot of shade. Yes. This is the common reed. It is native. It is great for bank stabilization. It is facultative wet, as you can see, so you would expect to find it along the stream edges and in the low sloughs. It also shows the invasive Arundinodonax, which can provide similar function, but it doesn't, it can take over and it doesn't provide the same values. And that's right here. You also notice on here that there's a stability rating, and that shows how much the plant is able to stabilize the sediments during flooding. And so that's another key component. The woody plants and trees are usually what we think about when we're looking at a riparian system. This one, buttonbush, as you see, it is an obligate. So it is found almost entirely in, high saturated zones, flooding during certain periods of the year. It's a really neat plant. It does provide a lot of value to pollinators. And and then here it's showing the example of the Titan Sphinx for the nectar. Pecans are usually more of a mature woodland stand in systems. We lost a lot of pecans in the hurricane at Fennessy. And so what used to be a fairly mature forest is now being regenerated. And we'll talk about that. But it is, facultative plant because you know that you could have them in your yard, or it can be periodically flooded and withstand that as well. Very important bottomland hardwood plant on the transition zone. Good stability rating. Little walnut is a little bit is rarer. We do have some on Fennessy. It can really throw you when you first see the leaf pattern, thinking it is something else. Black willow, facultative wet, almost always near the shoreline, very easily regenerated. It is an excellent pollinator plant. It also attracts a lot of insects, which the passerine birds and neotropical migrants really benefit from when they're in migration. And here's the cottonwood. There are some really big ones on these coastal systems. They're usually further upstream, but oftentimes away from the main channel now because the channel has changed its course. Kind of a neat thing to find. And then Mexican ash, there's a couple of different ashes in our system. This one is the most common one. It's a host to the tiger swallowtail. Wafer ash is also facultative. Wafer ash, this is more at the southern and eastern extent of its range in Texas, but it does occur in pockets in different riparian systems in the west. Great swallowtail host. For this, it's really important to know that there's two different species of hackberry that look very similar, Celtis laevigata and Celtis ehrenbergiana or pallida. Sorry, that's the spiny. The other one is the sugar hackberry, and we'll have those on for your plant press work to show the difference. Problem is that they hybridize here, so they're a little bit difficult to tell apart. And then you see all of the different species of butterflies that are provides host plant to. Cedar elm is kind of a medium successional plant. You'll see a lot of it on the Fennessy. We'll do a transect through an area that we could learn a lot about what's happened both from riverine flow, but also land management. And the question mark is uses it as a host plant. This is a great fruiting species, the red mulberry. There is a non-native white mulberry. This one would be the one that you would want to find and be able to have in your yard. Just don't have it over your tree. So the morning cloak host plant. Chinaberry is found in our riparian zones. This is a non-native plant. It actually comes in from urban areas and drainage from upstream, but it can take over the riparian zone if conditions are good for it, and we try to manage for them, against them. And then some of the forbs. We'll be seeing this really interesting plant, the frostweed. It's a great pollinator plant, and but it also, if it gets really, really cold, it will actually, quote, explode, and this real stiff cotton candy like substance comes out of the stem. We won't be seeing that part, but Really, really great plant for understory. The water primrose, you see it's obligate facultative wet. We normally see a lot of this at McGill Lake and along the edges, but since it's so dry, there's very little. We'll try to find some. And then for the ferns and vines, the scouring rush, a really cool obligate plant along the shorelines in the sloughs. It is, you know, I hope we could find some. It can withstand dying back and then becomes prolific during wet seasons. Maidenhair fern usually around seeps along the river bank. And then some of the other ferns and vines, something that's kind of important, the Mustang grape, which is a component of the riparian zone. We'll find some very large stems, and they actually function to hold the system together during heavy windstorms. So it's an important plant. And then we'll hopefully not get into any poison ivy. Please look out for it. And then the greenbrier, we will try to stay out of it too, because I've had to leave some clothes behind getting stuck in that. Okay, so we're going to finish up with this in looking at how we're going to use all this information in the field. You'll have one of these handouts in your plant press, and it basically shows the common name, the scientific name, and then also the abbreviation, the acronym that we use when we collect data. And so we want to use the same acronym, so that's on there for you. And also the wetland indicator. So when you look at this, and looking at the wetland indicators, and you look at the diagram on the right, going from dry to permanently flooded, can you see how if you even just had just these plants in your transect, what you could see as far as that moisture level increasing as you got to the permanently flooded. And we mentioned the button bush as being an obligate, and all the way up to Anaqua and live oak, you know, being more at the upper, higher elevation side, less flooded. What's really interesting is that we will find them in the riparian zone, which indicates how dry we can be in certain areas. So this is a standard plant press with all of the attendant layers. We will be you'll have a very small one that we'll use for this workshop. But basically, you have all of these different pieces of it, and you open the plant press. You put a specimen between a folded sheet of paper, or newspaper, blotting paper. You put a label in there, and then you dry them, and then you can have them in a permanent archived site. And then I'm just going to end with this. This is what we're going to be doing in the afternoon at one of the stations, and that is conducting a 30 by 2 meter belt transect. And I thought I would go over this now because when you're in the riparian woodland, and there's quite a few of us, sometimes it can be a little bit hard for all of us to get started on it. So I've created this diagram that shows the length of the transect being 30 meters by 2 meters. So we're going to take a meter tape, and we're going to stretch it from the beginning. We'll have a beginning point and go through the woodland 30 meters and lay that tape down. And then we will have some wire flagging, and we will delineate where every 5 meter mark is along the transects on both sides. So we'll go 1 meter away from the center line on both directions to make these demarcations. So there's where we're going to have these blocks, and you see them there. And so enter the trees, and we will be measuring those trees within that 2 by 30 meter transect by 5 meter blocks. And so basically we'll have some rules, but generally, majority of the plant at the measuring height is inside the transect. We measure it. If the majority of it is outside, we don't. We'll make those rules and everybody agree to them prior to starting. And then this is your data sheet that you'll be filling out. And so you see on the left-hand margin, you see the 0 to 5 meters, 5 to 10, 10 to 15, etc. And so we will actually look within that block and we'll find the first plant and identify it by its acronym. And then we will measure it with a DBH, diameter breast high tape at the standardized height, because all of us are different heights. That could be different if we were just going DBH for ourselves, but this will be our standard. And we will measure around that tree, and it will translate it to the diameter. And we'll enter that into the data sheet. There's lots of different parts of this that we'll go over of how we standardize the dates, getting the team's initials in, location, whether we're going up slope, down slope, and when we start and stop. It's really a lot of fun. It's a little chaotic at first, but pretty cool. And then we will talk about what we learned from that small data set about the diversity of the woodland we're in, the age stand of the trees that we sampled, and where it might be in succession or in regression. So that'll be really fun. And we'll actually be running 2 at a time. So we'll have 2 teams. So when we get there, I want some people to kind of step up and say, yeah, I'll run the tape. I'll put in the flags. I'll, do the DBH, and I'll record the data. So I really like this quote by Dan Cottle, that these rivers are our liquids history, that they actually tell us a lot about the past. They do indicate the present and can indicate where we're headed in the future. Riparian ecology and studies have really, really expanded throughout the country and the world. It is a very fascinating system and causes a lot of food for thought about what's going on. Okay.
Thank you, Liz.
Are there any questions? Yeah, sure.
We do have a couple in the chat from Tatum. First, is there an approximate percentage of time that obligate wetland plants require for root saturation, i.e. do crazy droughts noticeably affect short-term species stratification?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it actually goes by percentage, and usually the obligates are, at the upper end of 99% of the time they're saturated or flooded. And so when you change that condition, they're the first ones that suffer and are replaced by the facultative plants. So knowing the system and knowing what to expect gives you an indication of the health of that particular site. Good question.
Next one is, and do you notice that these vegetation species that stabilize the banks of riparian areas tend to be deep taprootish, or do they tend to be stretched out, shallower rooted in nature? far as bank stabilization goes, I mean.
Yeah. So what's really interesting, if we see some wind, what we call wind throw, when a tree is actually toppled over, usually by wind, but also by strong flooding, is that a lot of the short-lived plants are shallow rooted and wide. And then the ones that have been there that are older and more in the later succession tend to have a root system that is more similar to their crown, where it goes down deep and not as wide. So a combination of all of this is what creates that basket underneath the ground that stabilizes the soil, as well as the more close proximity trees are to each other, even our oaks in our yards, they actually are communicating with each other from a chemical standpoint. And so there's a lot of really neat studies about this ability for a stand of trees to be much healthier than a single tree, just by the fact that they're able to facilitate good conditions for their neighbor. Really fascinating work that's going on about that right now.
I think there's actually a book that we read as part of our training in the Louisiana Master Naturalist. I want to say it was called The Secret Life of Plants or The Secret Life of Trees.
Mm-hmm.
Like, talk a lot about that. And one of the examples was a tree that was cut down flush to the ground, and 10 years or more later, and it's still a living tree, technically being supported by all the ones around it, even though it doesn't have a trunk or anything. You scratch it, and it's still very green under there. So
Yeah.
some really interesting stuff there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They're alive. Okay.
That's for the question. So thank
Okay.
you, Liz. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to seeing you out there on Saturday.
Yes.
Enjoy the plant. Next up, we have Greg Simmons back at it again. And you're going to talk about the surface and groundwater dynamics, correct?
Correct.
Perfect.
And I am substituting in for James Dobson. And I am not a hydrologist, so there are elements of the water laws of Texas that I'm not as knowledgeable about. You know, a lot of the kind of physics of water, and I'm a petroleum geologist, so, or I was. So a lot of that physics dynamics are very similar. So let me share. Let's see here. Do you see hydrology and geomorphology?
Sir.
We do.
There is a famous quote, I think generally attributed to Mark Twain, that says, "Whiskey is for drinking and water is for fighting over." That's very pertinent to Texas today, particularly the part of Texas that we live in, that we're experiencing some very significant water issues. South Texas is running out of water, and so there are a lot of different opinions. This beautiful photograph is from a pasture in Finney Ranch that you will visit on Saturday. It doesn't look anything like that this year because this was 2 years ago following a very wet winter. So there's just tons of wildflowers out in this prairie. 2 years ago, very limited, very dry this year because we're in the middle of what could be a fairly extended drought. We'll just have to see. So this is the Texas Water Development Board. If you're interested in water, I encourage you to go to their website. There's just a ton of resources available. The Texas Water Development Board was founded after the 7-year drought, which was stretched from 1949 to about 1957 in Texas. And as if we didn't learn enough from the Dust Bowl drought in the 1930s, this was just a very impactful drought, very, very significant impact on particularly agriculture within the state. And now there are some other water demands that have started increasing substantially, even much more so than agriculture. We'll talk about in just a second. So we've seen some of this from Ray previously. This is a precipitation map. You can see there's a strong precipitation gradient going from a wet eastern Texas to a very dry western Texas, and then a temperature gradient from a less warm northern Texas to a hot southern Texas. So if you divide Texas into quadrants, the South Texas would be bearing the brunt of both low precipitation and high temperatures, which are going to exacerbate any droughts that we're experiencing. Both of these resources are from the Water Development Board. Surface water. So this is all the water that's flowing across the surface. Is actually owned all through the state. It's owned by the state of Texas. And in most cases, to use surface water, the landowner must obtain a permit to do so through the TCEQ. So if you want to build a small impoundment along some drainage in your property, you need a permit to do that. One of the exceptions would be utilization or trapping of rainwater on your property using rain barrels. This is something that's not only legal, but it's actually encouraged and promoted in the state of Texas. And there are some good resources available from the Water Development Board that helps people in planning to institute or to do that on your property, is to trap rainwater for use on your property. This is just our major water supplies, surface water supplies that are divided up into various watersheds. And you can see, I'll touch on this again later, just in the northeastern part of Texas, or at least the eastern part of Texas, this preponderance of these big reservoirs that are used to impound water for to manage floods, but also to provide water supplies for municipalities, also irrigation for agriculture. Groundwater in Texas. So groundwater in Texas is actually owned by, this is water that percolates into the surface. We have a number of aquifers. We previously talked about the Edwards Aquifer up in the Texas Hill Country that actually flows to the surface in what's called the Edwards Outcrop along the Balcones Fault Zone by a number of seeps or springs that contribute to the base load of our surface flow in South Texas. Ogallala Reservoir or Ogallala Aquifer up in North Texas. This is the largest aquifer in the United States. It extends all along the eastern Rocky Mountains. This is being severely over utilized. So the water levels in the Ogallala Aquifer are falling dramatically and are forcing a lot of changes in agriculture. In parts of southern Colorado, there's people that are unable to farm some of the more traditional things like cotton, which are very water hungry crops. They're having to give up some of those types of agriculture in areas that have historically relied on this Ogallala Reservoir or Ogallala Aquifer. In our area, there's the Gulf Coast Aquifer that's filling some of the shallow geological formations that we've discussed in some previous training. The Evangeline Aquifer, Chiltern Aquifer that correspond to the Beaumont, Lissy, and Goliad formations of our chapter area. Okay, and groundwater belongs to the property owner. So if it's below your property, you own that groundwater, and it's governed by the right of capture or rule of capture. So if you're able to capture it by a well that underlies your property, then you are entitled to that, even at the expense of your neighbors. You can draw water from your neighbor's property. This is different from oil and gas, where there are regulations that prevent you from draining resources from adjacent pieces of property or your neighbors. So that's one difference between oil and gas and groundwater. Okay, and there are some exceptions to that, and increasingly, the state of Texas prefers the use of groundwater conservation districts to help manage the utilization of groundwater. These districts are not always, but mostly county-wide groundwater conservation districts that do not change the ownership, but they can manage the kind of the rate of withdrawal from individual properties to better manage that the resource is not being overutilized. So planning is something that, again, those groundwater conservation districts are an example of planning. This is a diagram from the 60s. This was following the 7-year drought of the 1950s. This is when typically the price of energy was very low in the early 1970s. Or the 60s, very early 1970s. Then in 1973, the first Arab oil embargo, the price of oil increased about 300% over a very, very short period of time. But what this plan is there would be existing reservoirs in the eastern part of Texas, the wet part of Texas, and the blue ones are the existing reservoirs. The red ones were planned reservoirs. And then they would build pipelines that would pump this water uphill to the dry western part of Texas, and then distribute that both combination of surface water and maybe even some groundwater to the drier parts of the state. Also pumping out to South Texas, and then there's this big Falcon Reservoir, maybe distributing that water through the Rio Grande Valley. And this never really came to fruition just because of the exorbitant cost that would have been involved of again trying to pump all this water uphill. Became evident this was not a reasonable plan. So what's needed, and what we still don't have, is a more integrated plan on more of a watershed basis, as as opposed to just individual counties. What this map shows for kind of the South Texas area, there's the surface water flowing downhill in the dark blue. There's also the groundwater flowage in these light blue arrows. And then there's also the estuarine flow into the shallow estuaries of the Gulf of Mexico. And so what this tries to convey is this isn't a simple system. It's a very connected system that requires a very connected approach. It requires some new technology, including what's being approved and permitted in the Corpus Christi area of desalinization. Just any number of things to make up for the deficit. This is Choke Canyon Reservoir. This is Lake Corpus Christi. Those two reservoirs are currently below a combined 20% capacity of those two reservoirs. So whenever that capacity drops below 20%, then our area, Corpus Christi, automatically goes into a stage 3 watering restriction, which means that you can't use your sprinklers. You can still do some hand watering. As soon as the combined capacity of those two reservoirs goes below 15%, which we're headed for, it would appear, then we go into a stage 4 watering restriction, which means no watering of lawns or gardens at all. So again, it's we need a very integrated approach of planning things like desalinization. This is a pipeline that goes from Lake Texana. This was one of our training venues. Corpus Christi owns this surface water, or leased this surface water. So we pump surface water from Lake Texana to Corpus Christi, which is, again, that's where Rockport gets our water. So that's part of our combined South Texas water supply coming from Corpus Christi from these various sources. This is just supply planning. These are anticipated demands out through 2070. So about 50 years into the present or to the future, you can see the very, very strong increase in municipal demand in the future. And one thing that I think that is left off of this graph, you see that steam electric power staying pretty flat. Water demand is very strongly correlated with electricity generation from steam electric power, and particularly with a lot of this data center usage, electricity supply is just going through the roof in Texas, or electricity demand. So I think this little teal green projection is very conservative, or under estimating the demand in the future for steam electric power, electricity, and associated water usage. And then the one thing that's left off of this is there's water for irrigation, there's water for cities, there's water for manufacturing, steam, livestock. Where's the water for nature? There's no inclusion in the plan for the water that's needed for nature. And this is a graph that shows the freshwater inflow into the San Antonio Bay estuary. And this is a graph that shows as inflow increases, that the total harvest or the total health of that estuary is directly related to the amount of inflow water that is available. After all those other demands are met, there still has to be water left over to flow into these estuaries to support the health of those estuaries. And this is, again, this is something that has been under projected. And there's some people that think that, one drop of water that makes it to the coastline is a wasted drop of water. And nothing could be farther from the truth for the health of our estuaries. And I'm going to jump through. You have these slides, some of the stuff that we've already covered. This is just a view of what a river valley looks like. And if you can imagine or envision, we're going to drive in from the south gate. We're going to drive into the actual river valley, drive through some of these previous meander scars, past some of these old oxbows. We'll eventually come back up out of the valley onto an area where the pavilion is. This is where you'll have lunch. We'll be overlooking an old oxbow lake, which is Lake McGill. So just, I want you to think about when you drive into the south gate, what's the vegetation look like in these upland areas? And how does it change when you drive down this? You'll drive down this little slope into the river valley, and just notice how the vegetation changes as you drive into the river valley. And I just swiped this. I just saw it from Katie. I swiped it from her presentation. And I've never seen this perspective or remembered this perspective taken from a drone. You can see this is the edge of the river valley right here. So the drone is up above this upland area, and you can see the vegetation in the upland area. Here's Katie, that's Ray Kirkwood, participating in this vegetation survey. But just look how dramatic the change is from this upland area vegetation. See the color change down into the river valley, which represents that change of different vegetation, which is controlled by a different soil type and different availability of moisture in the river valley compared to this upland area. I'm going to skip over this, just some of the different soil types that I'm talking about, going, this is the upland Beaumont Formation soil type versus what we'll see, this very loose, very rich, organic rich soil type in the river valley. Kind of skip over this, but this is the geological formations that cross sections we've looked at before. But what I want to show is, so this is a cartoon that would show as we go down into a low area, we have two different types of permeable formations or aquifers. One is confined, which means that it's overlain by this impermeable layer. The other type is an unconfined aquifer, so it is free to rise as high as the water table is. But this confined reservoir, you can see this is the water table. So this would be the saturation limit, elevation limit within that aquifer. And so this entire aquifer would prefer to be at that elevation. It would prefer to be at that elevation, which is designed or referred to as the piezometric surface. but it's unable to rise to that elevation because it's confined. It has this impermeable layer overlying it that prevents this confined aquifer from rising to that preferred elevation. But if we were to drill a well through that impermeable layer, then that represents a pathway for these fluids to rise to that preferred elevation. And you can see this is a situation where the well, the surface where the well was drilled is actually still above that preferred layer. So the water does not rise all the way to the surface. But there could be an example in some low area where the surface elevation exists or is at a lower elevation than that preferred elevation layer of the aquifer. And in this situation, if there was a well drilled in that low area, then the water would flow to the surface under its own pressure and flow out onto the existing ground. And that's a situation that we'll see at Finnissy, where there is a artesian well that has been drilled where the surface elevation is below this preferred elevation of the aquifer. And so there will be water flowing to the surface under its own pressure and then actually flowing down into Lake McGill. And so it has a very interesting community associated with that area where that water is flowing out. And I'll cover this lanes balance at the river overlook, so we don't have to cover it today. We'll talk about some of the changes, both natural changes within nature, but also some human-caused changes that can alter the flow characteristics and the health of a river, whether it's an aggradational river or whether it's an incisional river, can be very much impacted by some of the human changes, such as dams upstream, courses, artificial courses to the river, but particularly riprap placement, and also isolation of the floodplain. And there's some other slides within what I've provided you that kind of show what would happen if you isolate part of the floodplain due to man-made levees. And that water that used to flow to that part of the floodplain now has to go somewhere else. So it can cause flooding downstream, can cause incision downstream. And there's areas in Houston, such as right along the Brazos River, where there are man-made levees, and there are people that are living kind of at the elevation of the floodplain, but they're separated from the floodplain by those man-made levees. So if you drive into Houston on I-59, you'll see those houses very close to the Brazos River and what used to be the floodplain of the Brazos River. So I'm out of time, so let's leave it at that. If you have any questions, we can cover them tonight, or we can also cover them on Saturday. Okay?
Perfect. Thank you, Greg. We do have.
Do you want to take this one question?
Sure.
On power line companies?
This is from Tatum. Do power line companies have the same limitation put on them as do oil and gas companies towards groundwater?
You know, so I would say yes. If they are, if they, again, a lot of times the power line company would actually lease the the land over which they run. So they don't actually own that land. They are just leasing that land as a right of way for their power lines. So I would say that they don't own the groundwater. It's the surface owner that still owns that groundwater.
There's actually an interesting business. I know a lot of guys in the landman business, which is the leasing of oil rights and mineral rights, and they have extended that business into assisting the power line companies with getting leased rights to the area underneath their poles, underneath their power, and also creating storage units in those leased areas. So it's a very similar legal situation.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Greg, for standing in and doing a great job on that. I believe that's all we have at the moment. Bill, do you have any notes for everybody for Saturday?
Okay, a couple of things. One, when we gather at the main gate, we're going to consolidate vehicles to as few as possible. So figure out who your best friends are in the group and who's fun to ride with and everything. Because we are hitting several different spots on the property, and we'll be commuting to those, via our cars. So, find somebody with a pickup truck. It's not rough country, but it is ranch roads. So figure that part out. We'll do that when we get there. We will rotate to the various sites, and we'll lead you through that process. You've got 2 areas in the morning, and then 2 others in the afternoon, and we'll have 2 separate groups, so you swap from one to the other, and then we'll spend the middle part of the day at McGill Lake for lunch, and that's pretty much it. The only other thing I would add is that you're going to be spending some time looking at the Mission River. And that is the only river in the state of Texas that does not have a dam on it anywhere. And this ranch has like 8 miles of frontage on that unspoiled river. So there's no place else in Texas where you can see unspoiled riverbank like you're going to see on Saturday. And it's a really cool spot. Any questions?
Okay. I will add that we do have the FEMACE waivers.
Yes.
Binders. Make sure you bring those. Bring your binder, or at least all of the handouts and stuff that we will likely be using there as well. That's in the Riparian section there. But definitely bring the waivers. I'm hoping not to have to bring. But if you're unable to or can't find them, whatever, let me know.
And the usual sunscreen, wear a hat, insect repellent. It was amazingly not bad out there on Tuesday as far as mosquitoes. I was surprised, because I've been out there when they would carry you away. But there's gonna be insects. You're gonna be wandering through riverbank area, so potential for chiggers and stuff. So definitely bring insect repellent, sunscreen. Bring your lunch. And something to take notes with, and you ought to be good. Anything else, Liz? Greg, anything else they need to bring with them?
No, I don't think so. Just be prepared to be able to consolidate your equipment and ride together. Very important. We don't have a big footprint on this place.
I think there is also a chance of rain for Saturday, so if you're feeling like it, bring a jacket. It's not a very high.
There you go.
Never know.
Okay.
All right. That's all I have then. Put 2 hours in. It'll be in the email. The recording will come out tomorrow morning, assuming everything works right. And that's it. Y'all have a good night. We'll see y'all.
The only other thing is if we do get that video out to you, I highly encourage you to watch it. It's some good stuff.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.